There is a creature in the Scottish borders that does not trick you, doesn't bargain, and it never forgives. If you meet it in the ruined tower, you'll never outrun it. This is the Redcap. I'm James, and this is Mythic Tides. The Borderlands, that long, restless frontier between England and Scotland, are not like other places. They breathe differently. The wind moves through ruined towers as if searching for old arguments. The grass itself seems to grow upon bones. Here in this scarred country, where the land remembers its feuds, superstition took root like gorse, sharp and persistent. And amongst its most persistent blooms is the legend of the Redcap, a creature as cruel as it is unforgettable. The Redcap is not, as you might wish, the sort of fairy to leave coins or bake bread. He's a goblin of the most malicious sort, a squat, iron-shod horror with claws like meat hooks and eyes that burn like embers in the dark. The old collectors describe him vividly, hair matted with filth, teeth long and sharp as nails, and that terrible hat, always crimson and always damp. For if the blood on it should ever dry, they say the Redcap would die. He lives, fittingly, where blood has been spilled before, in ruined castles, abandoned peeled towers, and those draughty places that still echo with old crimes. To enter such a ruin by moonlight was to court death itself, for Redcaps are said to delight in ambush. They pelt stones from the battlements, thrust from the shadows, and once their prey falls, they soak that hideous cap anew. Despite his heavy iron boots, he moves with uncanny speed, faster, they say, than a living man. There is no running from him, and yet even such darkness has its weakness. Holy words and sacred signs drive him off. Cross yourself, speak a verse of scripture, and the Redcap will shriek, vanish in a gout of flame, leaving only a single large tooth behind. Whether trophy or warning, the stories disagree. But it is some small comfort to know that evil, however ancient, can still be startled by faith. Of all the tales in which the Redcap appears, none is more dramatic than that of Lord William de Soulis, the cruel laird of Hermitage Castle, a man whose villainy was said to invite the devil's company. His keep still stands, black and brooding upon the moors, and even now it looks like a place where mercy has never lived. They say Lord Soulis was born under an unlucky moon. Nurses whispered that his eyes gleamed red in the cradle. As he grew, his appetites outstripped all decency. He imprisoned men without cause, took what he pleased, and laughed at the cries that echoed through his hall. When mere cruelty lost its savour, he turned to darker pursuits. It was then, they say, that Robin Redcap appeared, a goblin bound to the laird by oath and blood. The Redcap promised him invulnerability. No sword, nor spear, no rope, nor chain could harm him. Thus armed with infernal favour, Soulis ruled with impunity. His people vanished, his tenants starved, and still he feasted. Hermitage Castle grew notorious. Its stones, they said, wept blood when it rained. But tyranny has a way of writing its own ending. At last the villagers sought the counsel of Thomas the Rhymer, the prophet of Ursula Doone, who lived half in this world and half in the next. Thomas listened to their pleas and spoke the only riddle that could unmake such a curse. No steel nor hemp shall bind his hand, nor mortal forge his chain, but rope of lead and sand shall hold, and fire shall cleanse the stain. So the people set to work. They mixed molten lead with sifted sand, crafting ropes that were neither of earth nor man's making. When next the moon rose over the moor, they stormed Hermitage with their strange bindings. He broke swords with his bare hands, splintered spears like twigs, till the leaden ropes touched his flesh. Then his laughter faltered. Robin Redcap appeared beside him, clawing, biting, screaming in rage. The people swore they saw its glowing eyes dim when the first knot was tied. They dragged Soulis, roaring curses, to the ancient stone circle of Nine-Stane Rig. There, a great cauldron of lead had been hung over a roaring fire. He was thrust inside, bound in the ropes of prophecy, and boiled alive. The Redcap howled, a cry so piercing it curdled the clouds, and then was gone. When the fire guttered and the smoke cleared, only the stones stood witness. Yet Hermitage, they say, has never been silent since. The Redcap, unlike most creatures of fairy, lingers. In countless fragments of border folklore, his name endures. In the 19th century, children of Berwickshire would test their bravery by creeping to ruined towers and chanting, "Redcap, Redcap, come out if you dare, lift the snake and draw the bar." Few waited to see if the invitation was accepted. The bravest fled at once, shrieking laughter trailing behind them. Others swore they heard footsteps inside, the slow drag of iron boots on stone. Beyond the borders proper, his cousins go by other names. In Northumbria and Cumbria, they are sometimes called Dunters or Powries, spirits of ruin whose presence is marked not by sight, but by sound, a dull rhythmic thumping like a ghostly heart within the walls. If the pounding grew louder, it foretold death in the family. These are omens, not assassins. The true border Redcap, however, is a killer. Occasionally tales show a rare variant, the benign Redcap. At Grantully Castle in Perthshire, an elderly man in a red bonnet was said to appear from time to time, not to harm, but to bless. Those who glimpsed him were thought to have fortune for the year. A comforting thought, if a suspicious one. Perhaps the borders breed their horrors sterner than the Highlands. What are we to make of the Redcap? Scholars, with their fondness for metaphor, have called him an embodiment of the borders themselves, a living scar born of centuries of bloodshed. These hills were fought over so long that even the stones learned to remember. Each keep and tower carries the echo of raids and murders, and in that echo, the imagination of the people gave shape to a custodian, a janitor of wickedness, if you like, to ensure that no crime once done ever truly faded. The Redcap's cap, always soaked anew, is a ghastly metaphor for history's refusal to dry. Blood spilled once demands more blood to sustain it. In this sense, the Redcap is not just a monster, but a mirror, the violence of man reflected back upon himself. There are other readings, of course. Some folklorists suggest religious origins. The Redcap, they note, tends to haunt the ruins of abbeys and churches, sites desecrated during the Reformation. To the pious, he might have symbolised divine wrath, or perhaps the demonic residue left in places abandoned by faith. Even his name, that scarlet cap, may recall the red hats of cardinals, making him, in Protestant folklore, an infernal caricature of Rome. Whatever his origins, his persistence speaks to something deeper than dogma. The borders, after all, have always produced more ghosts than saints. By the 19th century, belief had faded, but fascination endured. Antiquarians like Robert Chambers and William Henderson catalogued the old stories, while poets and collectors drew inspiration from their grotesque charm. Sir Walter Scott, ever the magpie of the macabre, included the Redcap in his minstrelsy of Scottish Border, remarking with dry amusement that every ruined tower in the south of Scotland is supposed to have an inhabitant of this species. In modern times, the Redcap has wandered far from his misty cradle. He appears in role-playing manuals and fantasy epics, still clad in iron boots and dripping cap. Dungeons and Dragons made him a staple of its monstrous menagerie, a murderous fae who thrives on bloodlust. J.K. Rowling turned him into a cautionary tale in her wizarding classrooms. Hellboy fought one. Netflix has nearly given him a series. Yet shorn of his folklore, something in the Redcap persists, the mingling of the mundane and the monstrous, the small figure who represents something far larger and darker. He is perhaps what the borders themselves would dream if the land could sleep. So should you find yourself wandering those hills where the mist creeps low and the moon gilds the old battlements, remember the stories. The borderlands are thick with ghosts, and some of them still have teeth. If your candle flickers and you hear the scrape of metal in the dark, do not linger. Pray if you can remember the words. For somewhere in those ruins, the Redcap waits, and its cap may be growing dry again. If you've got something to say about the Red Cap, please do leave a comment and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'm James, this is Mythic Tides. I hope to see you again soon.